in the heart of London's most prestigious royal event, where cameras captured every smile and gesture for millions watching worldwide, a single moment unfolded that would shake the very foundations of the British monarchy. What appeared to be an innocent family gathering quickly transformed into something far more sinister when eagle-eyed observers noticed an unusual interaction between the Queen Consort and young Princess Charlotte. The footage, initially overlooked by mainstream media, showed Camilla making a subtle but unmistakable gesture toward the 9-year-old princess. Within seconds, a royal protection officer stepped forward, positioning himself deliberately between the Queen Consort and the child. His movement was swift, calculated, and professional, the kind of intervention that speaks volumes about hidden dangers. What had Princess Charlotte done to warrant such protection? What was Camilla's true intention? And why did a trained royal guard, sworn to protect the monarchy's reputation at all costs, choose to publicly intervene in what should have been a private family moment? The answers lie buried beneath decades of royal protocol, family tensions that run deeper than public perception, and a young princess who may have accidentally stumbled upon secrets that powerful people would kill to protect. This is the untold story of that fateful day, and the shocking events that followed when one brave guard decided that protecting an innocent child was worth more than preserving the crown's carefully crafted image. The morning of the Royal Windsor Horse Show dawned crisp and clear, with early sunlight filtering through the ancient oak trees that lined the grounds of Windsor Castle. Detective Inspector James Morrison stood at attention near the Royal Pavilion, his trained eyes scanning the growing crowd of spectators and dignitaries. After 15 years of royal protection service, he had learned to read the subtle signs of trouble before they became obvious to others. Morrison's radio crackled softly in his earpiece as his colleagues reported their positions around the expansive grounds. The event was considered low risk by royal standards, but Morrison never let his guard down. He had seen too many situations escalate from routine to dangerous in the blink of an eye. Today, the entire Wales family would be in attendance, along with other senior royals, making his job all the more critical. Princess Charlotte bounded across the manicured grass with the carefree energy that only a 9-year-old could possess. Her blonde hair caught the morning light as she chased after her younger brother Louis, while Prince George walked more sedately beside their father, Prince William. The children's laughter echoed across the grounds, drawing warm smiles from the gathered crowd of well-wishers and photographers. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, followed closely behind, her elegant navy dress flowing gracefully as she maintained the perfect balance between watchful mother and composed royal. She exchanged pleasantries with various officials and guests, but Morrison noticed how her eyes never strayed far from her children. Maternal instinct, he had observed, was often the most reliable security measure of all. The royal pavilion had been decorated with pristine white linens and fresh flowers, creating an atmosphere of understated luxury that the British monarchy had perfected over centuries. Crystal glasses caught the light as staff members made final preparations for the royal luncheon that would follow the morning's equestrian events. Everything appeared to be proceeding according to the meticulously planned schedule. Morrison's attention was drawn to a commotion near the main entrance where King Charles and Queen Consort Camilla were arriving in the royal Bentley. The vehicle glided to a smooth stop, and Morrison watched as the couple emerged to warm applause from the assembled crowd. Charles appeared relaxed and genuinely pleased to be attending one of his favorite annual events, while Camilla maintained her practiced public smile. As the royal family gathered in the pavilion, Morrison positioned himself strategically where he could observe all entrances while maintaining clear sightlines to the most vulnerable family members. The children, as always, required the most attention, not because of any specific threats, but because their unpredictable movements and natural curiosity could create security challenges. Princess Charlotte had discovered a small garden area behind the pavilion where several of the prize-winning horses were being prepared for their appearances. Her fascination with the magnificent animals was evident as she approached the fence, her small hands gripping the white rails as she watched the grooms brush the horses' gleaming coats. The scene was picture-perfect, exactly the kind of candid moment that royal photographers dreamed of capturing. Morrison noted the positions of the various security cameras and photographers, ensuring that Charlotte remained within acceptable boundaries while still allowing her the freedom to explore. He had worked with his family long enough to understand that overly restrictive security measures could be counterproductive, especially with children who needed some degree of normalcy in their extraordinary lives. The morning's equestrian events proceeded without incident, with various dignitaries and members of the public enjoying the spectacular displays of horsemanship that had made the Windsor Horse Show famous throughout the world. Morrison found himself relaxing slightly as the familiar rhythm of a successful royal event settled into place. The family appeared comfortable and engaged. The crowd was well behaved, and the weather continued to cooperate perfectly. During a brief intermission between events, Morrison noticed Camilla approaching the area where Princess Charlotte was still fascinated by the horses. There was nothing unusual about this. Royal family members often moved freely among themselves during such events. However, something about Camilla's body language caught Morrison's trained attention. Her movements seemed more purposeful than casual, and there was a tension in her posture that seemed inconsistent with the relaxed atmosphere of the day. Princess Charlotte looked up as Camilla approached, offering the polite curtsy she had been taught to give to senior members of the family. Camilla smiled and began speaking to the young princess, but Morrison couldn't hear their conversation from his position. What he could see, however, was the subtle change in Charlotte's demeanor as the conversation continued. The bright enthusiasm that had characterized her morning seemed to dim slightly, and she appeared to be listening very carefully to whatever Camilla was saying. Morrison shifted his position to get a better view while remaining inconspicuous. His years of experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and something about this interaction was triggering his professional alarm bells. He activated his radio discreetly, alerting his colleagues to maintain heightened awareness of the royal family's movements without specifying the reason for his concern. The conversation between Camilla and Charlotte continued for several more minutes, during which Morrison observed subtle changes in both their body language. Camilla seemed to be speaking with increasing intensity, occasionally glancing around as if checking to see who might be observing their interaction. Charlotte's responses appeared hesitant, and she had begun fidgeting with the hem of her dress, a nervous habit Morrison had observed in her before when she was uncomfortable. As their conversation neared its conclusion, Morrison witnessed something that made his blood run cold. Camilla reached into her small purse and withdrew what appeared to be a folded piece of paper. She glanced around once more, then leaned down closer to Charlotte, pressing the paper into the young princess's hand while speaking directly into her ear. The gesture was smooth and practiced, designed to appear casual to any casual observer, but Morrison's trained eye recognized it immediately as a covert handoff. Princess Charlotte looked down at the paper in her small hand with obvious confusion and what Morrison interpreted as growing distress. She began to say something to Camilla, but the queen consort quickly placed a finger to her lips in a clear gesture for silence, then pointed toward a specific location beyond the pavilion. The message was unmistakable. Charlotte was being given instructions that were meant to be kept secret from her parents and other family members. Morrison's protective instincts kicked into high gear as he processed what he was witnessing. Regardless of Camilla's position in the royal family, any secret communication with a 9-year-old child that deliberately excluded her parents was a potential security threat. His duty was clear: protect the royal children from all threats, regardless of their source. Without hesitation, Morrison began moving toward Princess Charlotte's location, maintaining the casual demeanor that his training had made second nature. He needed to assess the situation more closely and potentially intervene if necessary. As he approached, he could see that Charlotte was now looking around nervously, the folded paper still clutched in her small fist. Camilla noticed Morrison's approach and straightened up immediately, her expression shifting from the focused intensity he had observed during her conversation with Charlotte to the neutral pleasantness expected of royal public appearances. She offered Morrison a brief nod of acknowledgement before beginning to move away from Charlotte and back toward the main pavilion where the other adult family members were gathered. Morrison found himself facing a critical decision point. Protocol dictated that he should not interfere in family interactions unless there was clear evidence of immediate danger. However, his instincts were screaming that something was seriously wrong with what he had just witnessed. The secret nature of the communication, Charlotte's obvious distress, and Camilla's furtive behavior all pointed to a situation that required immediate attention. As Camilla walked away, Princess Charlotte remained standing by the horse enclosure, staring down at the paper in her hand with an expression that broke Morrison's heart. The carefree 9-year-old who had been laughing and playing just minutes earlier had been replaced by a confused and frightened child who clearly didn't understand what was happening to her. Morrison made his decision. He approached Princess Charlotte with the gentle manner he had developed over years of working with royal children, crouching down to her eye level to avoid appearing intimidating. "Your Royal Highness," he said softly, "is everything all right?" "You look a bit troubled." Charlotte looked up at him with eyes that held far too much worry for someone her age.
"Inspector Morrison," she whispered, using the informal title she had learned to use with him over the years.
"I think something's wrong, but I don't know what to do." She held up the folded paper with a trembling hand. "Aunt Camilla gave me this and told me not to tell anyone, but it feels scary." Morrison's heart rate increased as he realized that his worst fears were being confirmed. Whatever was written on that paper represented a threat to this innocent child, and Camilla's instructions for secrecy indicated that she knew her actions were inappropriate. He needed to handle this situation with extreme care to protect both Charlotte and the integrity of the royal family. "May I see the paper, Your Royal Highness?" Morrison asked gently. "Sometimes adults give us things that seem scary, but are actually harmless. I'd like to help you understand what it means." Charlotte nodded gratefully and handed him the folded paper. As Morrison carefully unfolded it, he prepared himself for anything from a harmless family note to something far more sinister. What he discovered exceeded even his worst expectations. The paper contained specific instructions for Charlotte to meet someone in a secluded location on the castle grounds that evening, along with explicit warnings about the consequences of telling her parents or any other adults about the meeting. The implications hit Morrison like a physical blow. This wasn't just inappropriate behavior, it was a clear attempt to isolate a vulnerable child from her support system and put her in a potentially dangerous situation. Regardless of who had written these instructions, his duty was clear. Princess Charlotte was being targeted, and he was the only person standing between her and whatever threat these instructions represented. Morrison looked up at Charlotte's anxious face and made a decision that would change everything. "Your Royal Highness," he said firmly, "I need you to stay very close to me for the rest of today. Can you do that?" When she nodded, he continued, "And I need you to promise me that you won't go anywhere alone, especially anywhere that other people tell you to go. Can you promise me that?"
"Yes, Inspector Morrison," Charlotte replied, her voice small but trusting.
"But am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart," Morrison assured her, using the informal term of endearment that felt appropriate given the circumstances. "You didn't do anything wrong at all. But there are some adults who might try to trick children into doing things that aren't safe, and my job is to make sure that never happens to you." As Morrison stood up, still clutching the damning piece of paper, he caught sight of Camilla watching them from across the pavilion area. Her expression was unreadable, but the intensity of her gaze left no doubt that she had noticed his intervention. Morrison met her stare directly, letting his own expression convey unmistakably that he knew exactly what she had been trying to do. The afternoon had just become far more complicated than anyone could have anticipated. Morrison knew that his next actions would have consequences that rippled far beyond this single day, but his primary concern remained unchanged: protecting Princess Charlotte from whatever danger she had unknowingly stumbled into. As he placed a protective hand on the young princess's shoulder and began guiding her back toward her parents, Morrison began planning his next moves in what had suddenly become the most important security operation of his career. Detective Inspector James Morrison's mind raced as he escorted Princess Charlotte back toward the main pavilion, where her parents were engaged in conversation with various dignitaries. The folded paper in his jacket pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, its contents representing a threat that could potentially destroy the carefully maintained stability of the royal family. He needed to handle this situation with unprecedented delicacy, while ensuring Charlotte's safety remained his top priority. Prince William looked up as Morrison approached with his daughter, immediately noticing the subtle signs of distress in both Charlotte's demeanor and Morrison's heightened alert posture. Years of working together had created an unspoken communication system between the protection officer and the future king, allowing them to convey important information without alarming the public or other family members. "Inspector Morrison," William said casually, while his eyes asked the question his voice couldn't. "I trust everything is proceeding smoothly." Morrison nodded formally, while positioning himself so that he could speak to William without being overheard by the gathered guests. "Your Royal Highness, I wonder if I might have a brief word with you and the Princess of Wales at your earliest convenience. There's a security matter that requires your immediate attention." Catherine, having overheard the exchange, smoothly excused herself from her conversation and joined her husband and daughter. Her maternal instincts had clearly picked up on the tension in the air, and her concerned glance at Charlotte confirmed that she had noticed her daughter's unusual quietness. "Mummy," Charlotte said quietly, moving closer to her mother's side, "Inspector Morrison says there are adults who sometimes try to trick children. Is that true?" The innocent question sent a chill through both parents, confirming their worst fears that something serious had occurred. Catherine knelt down to Charlotte's level, her training in child psychology evident in her gentle approach. "Sometimes that can happen, sweetheart, but that's why we have people like Inspector Morrison to keep us safe. Did someone say something to you that made you feel uncomfortable?" Morrison watched as Charlotte struggled with her promise to Camilla not to tell anyone about their conversation, warring against her natural trust in her parents and her growing sense that something was wrong. The internal conflict was clearly visible on her young face, and Morrison realized he needed to intervene before Charlotte's distress became more apparent to other observers. "Your Royal Highnesses," Morrison said quietly, "perhaps we could continue this conversation in a more private setting." I believe there are some details that would be better discussed away from the current environment. William immediately understood the implication that their conversation might be overheard or observed by unwanted parties. He glanced around the pavilion area, noting the various staff members, guests, and family members within earshot, including Camilla, who appeared to be watching their group with poorly concealed interest.
Of course, William agreed.
Inspector, would you escort us to the private reception room? I believe we have a few minutes before the next scheduled event. As the small group began moving toward the castle's interior, Morrison caught sight of Camilla making a subtle gesture to someone in the crowd. His trained eye followed her signal to identify its recipient, eventually spotting a man in an expensive suit who appeared to be a guest, but whose presence suddenly seemed far more suspicious. The man was holding a phone to his ear, and Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that Camilla's gesture and his phone call were connected. The private reception room was elegantly appointed, with antique furniture and portraits of previous monarchs, creating an atmosphere of timeless authority that seemed appropriate for the serious conversation they were about to have. Morrison ensured the door was securely closed before activating a small device that would detect and block any electronic surveillance equipment that might compromise their privacy. Inspector Morrison, Catherine began once they were alone. Please tell us exactly what happened. Morrison looked down at Charlotte, who was seated between her parents on an ornate sofa, then made a decision that he hoped was the right one. He needed to be honest about the threat while avoiding language that would traumatize the young princess further. Your Royal Highnesses, he began formally. Approximately 30 minutes ago, I observed the Queen Consort engage in what appeared to be a private conversation with Princess Charlotte near the horse enclosures. During this conversation, she gave Princess Charlotte a written message with specific instructions not to share it with anyone else. William's face darkened immediately. What kind of message? Morrison withdrew the folded paper from his jacket and handed it to William while continuing his explanation. The message contains instructions for Princess Charlotte to meet an unidentified person in an isolated location on the castle grounds this evening. It also includes explicit warnings about the consequences of informing you or any other adults about this meeting. Catherine's sharp intake of breath was audible as William unfolded the paper and read its contents. The color drained from the prince's face as he absorbed the implications of what he was seeing. This is, he began, then stopped himself, clearly struggling to find appropriate words while his daughter was present. Charlotte, sweetheart, Catherine said gently, you did exactly the right thing by talking to Inspector Morrison when you felt confused and scared. We're very proud of you for being so brave. But Aunt Camilla said I mustn't tell anyone, Charlotte replied, her voice small and worried. She said something bad might happen if I did. Morrison felt a surge of protective anger at the psychological manipulation this innocent child had endured. Using fear to enforce secrecy was a classic predatory tactic, and seeing it employed against Princess Charlotte by a member of her own family made his determination to protect her even stronger. William stood up abruptly, the paper still clutched in his hand. Inspector Morrison, in your professional opinion, what level of threat are we dealing with here? Morrison chose his words carefully, mindful of Charlotte's presence, while ensuring that William understood the severity of the situation. Your Royal Highness, any attempt to isolate a child from their support system and arrange secret meetings represents a significant security concern. The specific language used in that message suggests this is part of a coordinated effort rather than an isolated incident. Catherine's eyes widened as she processed the implications of Morrison's assessment. You're saying this is bigger than just Camilla acting alone? That's my preliminary assessment. Yes. I observed what appeared to be coordinated communication between the Queen Consort and at least one other individual following her interaction with Princess Charlotte. This suggests a level of planning and organization that indicates a broader conspiracy. William began pacing the small room, his protective instincts as both a father and future king clearly in conflict with the shocking realization that a threat to his daughter was coming from within his own family.
What do you recommend as our next course of action, Inspector?
Morrison had been formulating a plan since the moment he first saw Camilla hand Charlotte the mysterious paper.
First, Princess Charlotte should not be left unaccompanied for the remainder of today's events.
Second, we need to immediately investigate any connections between the Queen Consort and unknown individuals who have gained access to today's event. Third, we should consider the possibility that this represents an attempt at kidnapping or worse.
Kidnapping? Catherine's voice was barely above a whisper as she pulled Charlotte closer to her side. The pattern of behavior I observed today matches several indicators that we train to recognize.
The use of secrecy and fear to manipulate a child, the arrangement of an isolated meeting, and the involvement of multiple coordinated individuals all suggest a serious criminal conspiracy. Charlotte looked up at her parents with confused eyes. "Are you saying Aunt Camilla is trying to hurt me?" William knelt down beside his daughter, struggling to find words that would be both truthful and age-appropriate. "We don't know exactly what Aunt Camilla was trying to do, sweetheart, but Inspector Morrison is right that no adult should ever ask you to keep secrets from Mummy and Daddy, especially secrets about meeting other people." Morrison's radio crackled softly in his earpiece as one of his colleagues reported unusual activity near the castle's service entrance. He listened carefully to the coded message, then felt his stomach drop as he realized that several unidentified individuals had been spotted attempting to gain unauthorized access to the grounds. "Your Royal Highnesses," Morrison said urgently, "I'm receiving reports of suspicious activity around the perimeter of the castle grounds. I strongly recommend that we move Princess Charlotte to a secure location immediately and place the entire family under enhanced protection protocols." Catherine stood up quickly, lifting Charlotte into her arms despite the princess's protest that she was too old to be carried. "Where can we go that's completely safe?" Morrison was already mentally reviewing the castle's security features and identifying the most defensible locations. There's a secure communications room in the castle's basement level that was originally designed as a bomb shelter during World War II. It's been updated with modern security systems and communication equipment. We can establish a protected position there while I coordinate with additional security personnel. As they prepared to leave the reception room, Morrison caught sight of movement through one of the tall windows that overlooked the pavilion area. Camilla was engaged in animated conversation with the same suspicious individual he had noticed earlier, and their body language suggested increasing urgency and agitation. "We need to move now," Morrison said firmly. "The situation appears to be escalating beyond the original threat assessment." William took Charlotte from Catherine's arms, holding his daughter close, as Morrison led them through a series of corridors that most castle visitors never saw. These were the working passages used by staff and security personnel, designed to allow rapid movement throughout the building without being observed by guests or the public. As they walked quickly through the stone corridors, Charlotte whispered to her father, "Daddy, I'm scared." "I don't understand what's happening." "I know, sweetheart," William replied softly, his own voice tight with emotion. "But Inspector Morrison and all of his colleagues are going to make sure nothing bad happens to you. Sometimes grown-ups have to deal with complicated problems, but you don't need to worry about any of it." Morrison led them down a narrow staircase that descended deeper into the castle's foundation than most people ever ventured. The walls here were original medieval stone, thick enough to withstand sieges and modern enough to house the sophisticated security equipment that had been installed over the decades. The secure communications room was exactly as Morrison had described, a modernized version of a World War II bunker, equipped with multiple communication systems, surveillance monitors, and defensive capabilities that could protect the royal family from virtually any conventional threat. As soon as they were inside, Morrison activated the room's lockdown protocols, sealing them safely away from whatever danger was developing above ground. Catherine settled onto a comfortable chair with Charlotte in her lap, while William immediately moved to the communication equipment to contact additional security personnel and potentially notify other government agencies about the developing threat. Morrison began coordinating with his colleagues throughout the castle grounds, trying to piece together a complete picture of exactly how many people were involved in whatever conspiracy was targeting Princess Charlotte. As reports began coming in from various security positions around the castle, a disturbing pattern emerged. Multiple individuals with questionable credentials had gained access to the day's events. Several staff members had been observed engaging in suspicious communications, and at least 3 vehicles had been spotted in locations that suggested they were positioned for a rapid departure from the grounds. "Inspector Morrison," William said grimly as he absorbed the incoming intelligence reports, "this appears to be a highly coordinated operation. How long have you suspected that something like this might happen?" Morrison paused in his communications to consider William's question carefully. "Your Royal Highness, I've noticed subtle changes in security patterns and personnel behavior over the past several weeks, but nothing that rose to the level of actionable intelligence. Today's events represent the first concrete evidence of a direct threat to your family." "Several weeks?" Catherine's voice reflected her growing alarm. "Are you saying this has been planned for that long?" "At minimum, yes. The level of coordination and the number of people involved suggests this operation has been in development for quite some time. What we witnessed today with the Queen Consort and Princess Charlotte was likely meant to be the final phase of whatever they were planning." Charlotte looked up at her mother with wide, frightened eyes. "Mummy, does this mean Aunt Camilla has been planning to hurt me for weeks?" Morrison felt his heart break at the innocent question from this brave little girl who was trying to understand adult evil that no child should ever have to face. Before Catherine could respond, Morrison's radio erupted with urgent reports from his colleagues above ground. What they were hearing would change everything they thought they knew about the threat they were facing. The urgent voices crackling through Morrison's radio filled the secure communications room with a tension that made Princess Charlotte press closer to her mother's protective embrace. The reports coming from Morrison's colleagues above ground painted a picture that was far worse than any of them had initially imagined. What had begun as a concerning interaction between Camilla and a 9-year-old child was rapidly revealing itself to be part of a sophisticated criminal conspiracy with international implications.
Alpha Team reports 5 unidentified vehicles approaching the castle perimeter, Morrison's radio announced. License plates appear to be false or stolen.
Occupants are heavily armed and attempting to breach the main security checkpoint. William's face went pale as he processed the implications of what they were hearing. Inspector Morrison, are we dealing with a kidnapping attempt or something even more serious? Morrison continued monitoring the radio chatter while simultaneously accessing the castle's extensive surveillance system through the secure room's computer terminals. Multiple screens flickered to life, showing various angles of the castle grounds and the developing crisis above. What he saw confirmed his worst fears about the scope and organization of the threat they were facing.
Your Royal Highness, Morrison said grimly. Based on the intelligence we're receiving, this appears to be a coordinated assault on the castle with the specific objective of capturing Princess Charlotte. The number of personnel involved and their level of equipment suggests this is either a state-sponsored operation or a very well-funded criminal organization.
Catherine's arms tightened protectively around her daughter as the reality of their situation became clear. How is this possible? How could so many people coordinate such an elaborate plan without our security services detecting it? Morrison's expression darkened as he considered the implications of her question. Ma'am, the level of inside knowledge required to execute an operation of this complexity suggests that there are individuals within the royal household or security services who have been compromised. The Queen Consort's involvement indicates that the conspiracy reaches to the very highest levels of the royal family. Charlotte looked up at her parents with eyes that held too much understanding for someone her age.
Are you saying that some of the people who are supposed to protect us are actually trying to hurt us?
William knelt down beside his daughter, struggling to find words that would be honest without being terrifying. Sometimes, sweetheart, people who seem like they're on our side are actually working with bad people. But Inspector Morrison and his team are the good guys, and they're going to make sure nothing happens to you. Morrison's radio erupted again, with reports that made his blood run cold. Bravo team reports that the Queen Consort has been observed coordinating with the unknown assault team. She appears to be providing them with detailed information about the castle's layout and security protocols. The revelation that Camilla was actively collaborating with armed intruders sent shockwaves through the small group huddled in the secure room. Morrison had suspected that her interaction with Charlotte was part of a larger conspiracy, but the reality that she was actively betraying the royal family to foreign or criminal agents exceeded even his worst-case scenarios.
We need to consider the possibility that King Charles is also in immediate danger, Morrison said urgently. If the Queen Consort is working with hostile forces, his life may be at risk as well.
William immediately activated the emergency communication protocols that would alert the king's personal protection detail to the developing threat. As he worked frantically to coordinate with other security teams throughout the royal household, Morrison continued monitoring the multiple screens showing the escalating situation above ground. The surveillance cameras revealed a scene that looked more like a military operation than a criminal assault. The unknown attackers were dressed in tactical gear and moved with the precision and coordination of trained special forces operatives. Their equipment included advanced communication devices, weapons that were clearly military-grade, and what appeared to be specialized vehicles designed for rapid extraction operations. Inspector Morrison, Catherine said quietly, trying not to alarm Charlotte further, "What exactly do you think these people want with our daughter?" Morrison paused in his monitoring activities to consider how much information he should share while Charlotte was listening.
The truth was almost too horrible to contemplate. A 9-year-old member of the British royal family would be an incredibly valuable asset to hostile foreign governments or terrorist organizations, either as a hostage for political leverage or as a target for even more sinister purposes.
"There are several possibilities," Morrison replied carefully, ranging from simple kidnapping for ransom to more complex political motivations. What's clear is that they've invested significant time, money, and personnel into this operation, which suggests their objectives are extremely important to whoever is funding them.
Charlotte's voice was barely above a whisper when she asked, "Inspector Morrison, are they going to try to take me away from Mummy and Daddy?"
Morrison knelt down to Charlotte's eye level, drawing on his years of experience working with frightened children in dangerous situations. Princess Charlotte, I want you to listen to me very carefully. There are some bad people who want to do harmful things, but my job, and the job of all the good people working with me, is to make sure that never happens. We have special training and special equipment, and we're very good at protecting people we care about. The radio chatter continued with increasingly urgent reports. Morrison's colleagues were coordinating a complex defensive operation while trying to maintain the safety of all the legitimate guests and staff members who were still on the castle grounds. The challenge was enormous: distinguish between genuine threats and innocent bystanders while preventing the attackers from achieving their objectives. Charlie team reports that several staff members have been identified as probable inside collaborators, the radio announced. They appear to be attempting to disable internal security systems and provide the assault team with real-time information about defensive positions. William looked up from his own communication activities with an expression of profound betrayal and anger. How long has this conspiracy been in place? How many people within our own household have been working against us? Morrison was beginning to piece together a timeline based on the intelligence reports flowing into the secure room. Your Royal Highness, the sophistication of this operation suggests it's been in development for months, possibly longer. The number of inside collaborators indicates a level of infiltration that would have required years to establish. The implications of Morrison's assessment were staggering. If the conspiracy had been years in the making, it meant that Charlotte had been living under threat for most of her young life, without anyone realizing the extent of the danger. It also raised terrifying questions about what other royal family members might be at risk, and how many trusted individuals were actually working for hostile forces. Catherine's voice shook slightly as she asked, "If they've been planning this for years, why are they acting now? What's changed that made them decide to move forward today?" Morrison had been wondering the same thing, and the answer he was beginning to formulate was deeply troubling. "Ma'am, Princess Charlotte is approaching an age where she will begin taking on more public duties and having greater independence. If someone wanted to abduct or harm her, this might represent their last opportunity before her security profile increases significantly." The radio reports continued to paint an increasingly dire picture of the situation above ground. The attackers had successfully breached the castle's outer security perimeter and were advancing toward the main buildings with clear knowledge of defensive positions and security protocols. Morrison's colleagues were fighting a defensive battle against enemies who seemed to know their every move in advance. "Delta Team requests immediate backup," the radio crackled. "The assault team appears to have detailed intelligence about our defensive strategies. They're countering our standard protocols with surgical precision." Morrison realized that their secure room, while defensible against conventional attacks, might not remain safe indefinitely if the attackers had inside knowledge of the castle's security systems. He began mentally reviewing alternative escape routes and emergency protocols, while coordinating with law enforcement and military units that were responding to the crisis. "Your Royal Highnesses," Morrison said urgently, "we need to consider the possibility that our current position may be compromised. I recommend that we prepare for immediate evacuation to a secondary secure location." William looked around the reinforced room that had seemed so safe just minutes earlier. Where could we possibly go that would be more secure than here? Morrison was already accessing classified emergency protocols that most people never knew existed. There are underground tunnels connecting this castle to other secure facilities, originally built during World War II and updated during the Cold War. We can evacuate through routes that even most security personnel don't know about. As Morrison prepared to implement the emergency evacuation protocols, his radio delivered news that changed everything they thought they understood about the threat they were facing. The voice of his team leader was tight with disbelief and alarm as he reported information that would shake the foundations of their understanding of the royal family itself. "All units, we have confirmed identification of the assault team leader. This operation appears to be connected to intelligence services of a hostile foreign government. The objective is not simple kidnapping, repeat. This is not a standard kidnapping operation." Morrison felt the blood drain from his face as he absorbed the implications of what his colleague had just reported. If foreign intelligence services were involved, Princess Charlotte wasn't just facing kidnapping. She was caught in the middle of an international incident that could have consequences far beyond her personal safety. Charlotte looked up at the adults around her, sensing the increased tension even though she didn't understand the specific details of what was happening. "Inspector Morrison, are we going to have to run away from the bad people?" Morrison looked down at this brave little girl who was facing dangers that would terrify most adults, and made a silent vow that he would do whatever it took to protect her from the evil that was closing in around them. "Princess Charlotte, Sometimes the best way to stay safe is to move to an even safer place. Are you ready to be very brave and go on an adventure with us? As Charlotte nodded with the trust that only a child could show in such circumstances, Morrison activated the emergency protocols that would either save the royal family or lead them directly into an even more dangerous trap. Above ground, the battle for Windsor Castle was escalating beyond anything anyone had ever imagined possible, and their only hope of survival lay in secrets buried deep beneath the ancient stones that had protected British royalty for nearly 1,000 years. The hidden passages beneath Windsor Castle had remained secret for decades, known only to the highest levels of British security services and a handful of royal protection officers like Detective Inspector James Morrison. As he led Prince William, Catherine, and Princess Charlotte through the narrow stone corridors illuminated by emergency lighting, Morrison could hear the distant sounds of the battle raging above them. The ancient walls that had protected British royalty for centuries were now the only barrier between Princess Charlotte and forces that wanted to destroy everything the monarchy represented. Morrison's radio continued to provide updates on the deteriorating situation above ground, each report more alarming than the last. The attackers had not only breached the castle's outer defenses but were systematically dismantling the security infrastructure with inside knowledge that could only have come from years of careful planning and infiltration. Echo Team reports that the assault forces gained access to the main castle building, Morrison's radio announced. They appear to be following a predetermined route toward the basement levels. Recommend immediate implementation of Omega protocols. Morrison's blood ran cold at the mention of Omega protocols, the most extreme emergency measures available to royal protection services, typically reserved for situations where the continuation of the monarchy itself was at stake. The fact that his superiors were considering such drastic action indicated that the threat they were facing went far beyond a simple kidnapping attempt. Princess Charlotte walked between her parents in the narrow corridor, her small hand firmly grasped in her father's larger one. Despite her obvious fear, she had shown remarkable courage throughout the crisis, following instructions without complaint and trusting the adults around her to keep her safe. Morrison marveled at her resilience while simultaneously feeling the enormous weight of responsibility for protecting this innocent child from dangers she couldn't possibly understand. Inspector Morrison, William said quietly as they continued through the underground passages, what exactly are Omega protocols? I've never heard that term before. Morrison hesitated before responding, aware that the information he was about to share would fundamentally change William's understanding of the threats facing the royal family. Your Royal Highness, Omega protocols are emergency measures designed to ensure the survival of the monarchy in the event of a coordinated attack on multiple senior royals simultaneously. They involve the complete evacuation and relocation of surviving family members to secure locations outside the United Kingdom. Catherine's intake of breath was audible in the confined space of the tunnel. Are you saying this attack isn't just targeting Charlotte? Are other family members in danger as well? Morrison's radio provided the answer before he could respond. All units, we have confirmation that coordinated attacks are underway at multiple royal residences. Buckingham Palace, Balmoral, and Sandringham are all reporting similar assault patterns. This appears to be a systematic attempt to eliminate or capture multiple members of the royal family simultaneously. The revelation that the conspiracy extended far beyond Windsor Castle sent shockwaves through the small group making their way through the underground tunnels. Morrison realized they were dealing with an enemy that possessed resources and coordination capabilities that rivaled those of nation-states. The implications were terrifying. If successful, this operation could effectively destroy the British monarchy in a single coordinated strike. Daddy, Charlotte said in a small voice, does this mean something bad is happening to Grandpa Charles and Uncle Harry and everyone else too? William struggled to find words that would be truthful without overwhelming his young daughter with the full horror of their situation. We don't know exactly what's happening with everyone else right now, sweetheart, but Inspector Morrison and all the other protection officers are working very hard to make sure all of our family members stay safe. Morrison led them deeper into the tunnel system, following routes that appeared on no official blueprints and were known only to a select few individuals within the security services. These passages had been constructed during World War II as part of a comprehensive plan to protect the royal family from Nazi bombing campaigns, then updated and expanded during the Cold War to provide protection against nuclear attack. The tunnels themselves were marvels of engineering, with reinforced concrete walls, independent air filtration systems, and communication equipment that could function independently of the surface infrastructure. Morrison had trained extensively in these passages, but had never imagined he would actually need to use them to protect a royal family member from a real threat. As they walked through the dimly lit corridors, Morrison continued monitoring radio communications while mentally reviewing the emergency protocols he had memorized during years of training. The safe house they were heading toward was located several miles from Windsor Castle, accessible only through the underground tunnel system and equipped with everything necessary to sustain a small group for weeks if necessary. "Inspector Morrison?" Catherine asked quietly. "How long have these tunnels existed? How is it possible that such an extensive underground system could be kept secret for so long?" Morrison was grateful for the distraction of answering her question, as it helped mask the increasingly urgent radio reports he was receiving about the deteriorating situation above ground. The original tunnels were constructed in the early 1940s, under the supervision of Winston Churchill himself. They were designed to ensure that the royal family could survive even a direct hit on Windsor Castle. Over the decades, they've been expanded and modernized to address new threats. The radio crackled again with news that made Morrison's worst fears seem optimistic by comparison. "All units, we have intelligence indicating that the assault teams are equipped with chemical weapons. Recommend immediate activation of biological/chemical defense protocols. This is not a drill." The mention of chemical weapons sent a chill through Morrison that had nothing to do with the cool air in the underground tunnels. Chemical attacks represented a level of sophistication and ruthlessness that indicated their enemies were prepared to commit mass murder to achieve their objectives. The fact that they were willing to use such weapons against a 9-year-old child revealed a level of evil that Morrison had hoped never to encounter in his career. Princess Charlotte, despite her young age, picked up on the increased tension in the adults around her. "Inspector Morrison, are the bad people getting closer to us? You look scared." Morrison realized that his professional mask had slipped in the face of the unprecedented threat they were confronting. He made a conscious effort to project calm confidence while answering Charlotte's question. "Princess Charlotte, there are definitely bad people trying to do harmful things, but we're moving to a place where they can't find us or hurt us. The people I work with are very good at their jobs, and they're not going to let anything happen to you." As they continued through the tunnel system, Morrison received a radio communication that provided the first piece of good news in what felt like hours. Alpha Team reports successful evacuation of His Majesty King Charles from Buckingham Palace. The King is secure and en route to a classified location. Casualties among protection personnel are significant but manageable. William's relief at hearing that his father was safe was visible even in the dim light of the tunnel. "Thank God," he whispered. "At least we know Charles is out of immediate danger." Morrison continued, leading them through a series of increasingly narrow passages that required them to walk single file. The route was deliberately designed to be difficult for large groups to navigate, providing a natural defensive advantage against pursuers. As they walked, Morrison explained the security features they were encountering. "These tunnels were designed with multiple defensive positions," he said quietly. "If anyone tries to follow us, there are automated systems that conceal sections of the tunnel and create impassable barriers. Additionally, there are monitoring systems throughout the route that will alert us to any unauthorized presence." The safe house they were approaching had been constructed to survive virtually any conceivable attack, from conventional explosives to electromagnetic pulses that could disable electronic equipment. Morrison had visited the facility during training exercises, but had never seen it used for its intended purpose of protecting royal family members from existential threats. As they reached what appeared to be a dead end in the tunnel system, Morrison activated a concealed control panel that revealed itself only when approached with the correct electronic key. The sophisticated security system required multiple forms of authentication, including biometric scans and coded sequences that changed daily. "This is incredible," William said as he watched Morrison navigate the complex security procedures. "How many people know about this place?" "Fewer than 20 people in the entire world," Morrison replied as the massive steel door began to slide open with almost silent efficiency. The location and access codes are classified at levels that exceed even most government ministers' security clearances. The safe house interior was unlike anything any of them had expected. Rather than the utilitarian bunker they had anticipated, the facility resembled a luxury apartment, complete with comfortable furniture, modern kitchen facilities, and even entertainment systems designed to make extended stays bearable. The walls were lined with communication equipment that could maintain contact with security services worldwide. Princess Charlotte's eyes widened as she took in their new surroundings. "This place is amazing. It's like a secret house hidden under the ground. Do other princesses have places like this too?" Morrison smiled at Charlotte's ability to find wonder, even in their dangerous circumstances. "This is a very special place that was built just for people like you and your family, in case you ever needed somewhere extra safe to stay." Most princesses never get to see places like this because most princesses never need them. As Morrison activated the safe house's communication systems and defensive protocols, William and Catherine began to grasp the full magnitude of what was happening above ground. The multiple screens in the facility showed news broadcasts from around the world, and the breaking news reports painted a picture of a coordinated international crisis that went far beyond their personal safety.
Inspector Morrison, Catherine said as she watched news reports of emergency sessions being called in Parliament and the United Nations, "This isn't just about Charlotte, is it? Someone is trying to destroy the entire British monarchy."
Morrison nodded grimly as he continued monitoring communications from security services around the world. "Ma'am, based on the intelligence we're receiving, this appears to be part of a broader destabilization effort targeting multiple Western democracies. The attack on the royal family is designed to create chaos and uncertainty that can be exploited for other purposes." The radio crackled with a new communication that would provide crucial information about who was behind the unprecedented assault on the British royal family.
As Morrison listened to the intelligence report, he realized that their ordeal was far from over, and that the enemies they were facing possessed capabilities and motivations that exceeded anything the security services had previously encountered. The battle for Princess Charlotte's safety had become part of a much larger war for the future of democracy itself. The secure communication systems in the underground safe house crackled to life with intelligence reports that would finally reveal the true scope of the conspiracy that had threatened Princess Charlotte and the entire British royal family. Detective Inspector James Morrison found himself at the center of an international crisis that had implications far beyond anything he could have imagined when he first noticed Camilla's suspicious behavior at the Windsor Horse Show. "Intelligence control to Safe House 7, the encrypted radio announced. "We have confirmed identification of the hostile organization behind today's coordinated attacks. Preliminary investigation indicates a joint operation between rogue elements of foreign intelligence services and domestic extremist groups funded by hostile nation-states."
Morrison felt a mixture of relief and apprehension as he absorbed this information. Relief because they finally had answers about who was behind the attacks, and apprehension because the revelation confirmed that they were dealing with enemies who possessed nearly unlimited resources and international reach. Princess Charlotte sat curled up between her parents on the safe house's comfortable sofa, her earlier fear gradually giving way to exhaustion as the adrenaline of their escape began to wear off. Despite everything she had endured, she had shown remarkable courage and resilience throughout the crisis, trusting the adults around her to keep her safe while adapting to circumstances that would have overwhelmed many adults. "Inspector Morrison," William said quietly, ensuring that Charlotte couldn't overhear their conversation, "what exactly does this intelligence mean for our family's long-term safety?"
If we're dealing with state-sponsored terrorism, this threat isn't going to simply disappear.
Morrison had been grappling with the same question as he processed the incoming intelligence reports.
The enemies they had faced were not common criminals who might be deterred by increased security measures. Instead, they were professional operatives with access to sophisticated equipment and extensive networks of collaborators, including individuals who had successfully infiltrated the highest levels of the royal household. "Your Royal Highness," Morrison replied carefully, "the intelligence we're receiving suggests that this operation represents years of careful planning and infiltration." The fact that they were able to compromise so many people within the royal household indicates that traditional security measures may not be sufficient to protect your family going forward. Catherine leaned closer to their conversation, her voice tight with concern. "Are you saying that we can't trust anyone in our regular staff or security details? How are we supposed to live if we can't trust the people around us?" The question struck at the heart of what Morrison knew would be the most challenging aspect of the family's recovery from this crisis. The psychological damage caused by betrayal from trusted individuals often proved more difficult to overcome than the immediate physical threat. Princess Charlotte, in particular, would need extensive support to process the fact that people she had trusted, including Camilla, had been working to harm her. Morrison's radio provided an update that offered some hope for resolution of the immediate crisis. Intelligence Control reports that coordinated law enforcement and military operations are underway at all compromised royal residences. Preliminary casualty reports indicate minimal losses among loyal security personnel and successful neutralization of multiple hostile operatives. William's relief was visible as he processed the news that the immediate physical threat was being contained. However, Morrison knew that the deeper implications of what had occurred would require months or years to fully address. The royal family's security protocols would need to be completely restructured, and every individual with access to royal family members would need to be thoroughly reinvestigated. Princess Charlotte looked up at the adults who had been speaking in hushed tones around her. "Inspector Morrison, does this mean we can go home now? I miss my room and my toys. Morrison knelt down to Charlotte's eye level, drawing on his experience working with children who had experienced trauma. Princess Charlotte, we're going to make sure it's completely safe before we take you anywhere else. But yes, eventually you'll be able to go back to your normal life. It might be a little different than it was before, but you'll still have your family and people who care about you. The radio crackled again with news that would provide crucial information about Camilla's role in the conspiracy. Intelligence Control reports successful capture and interrogation of the Queen Consort. Preliminary debriefing indicates extensive cooperation with foreign intelligence services dating back several years. Motivation appears to be a combination of financial incentives and ideological alignment with anti-monarchist movements. The revelation that Camilla had been working against the royal family for years sent shockwaves through the safe house. Morrison realized that virtually every interaction between Camilla and the royal children during that time would need to be reviewed and analyzed for potential threats or attempts at manipulation.
How could we have missed something like this for so long? William asked, his voice reflecting a mixture of anger and profound sadness. How could someone who was part of our family be working to destroy us?
Morrison had seen similar cases of long-term infiltration and betrayal during his career, though never at such a high level or with such devastating consequences.
Your Royal Highness, the most effective double agents are often people who appear completely trustworthy and have legitimate reasons for being close to their targets. Camilla's position gave her access to information and opportunities that would have been impossible for an outsider to obtain. Catherine pulled Charlotte closer as she processed the implications of what they were learning. Charlotte, sweetheart, do you remember any other times when Aunt Camilla said or did things that seemed strange or made you uncomfortable? Charlotte thought carefully before answering, her young mind working to process memories in light of what she now understood about Camilla's true nature. She used to ask me lots of questions about where we were going and what we were doing, and sometimes she would give me little presents and ask me not to tell you and Daddy about them. Morrison felt his anger surge at this evidence of psychological manipulation that had been going on for an extended period. The pattern Charlotte was describing represented classic grooming behavior, designed to establish trust and secrecy that could be exploited for harmful purposes. The radio provided another crucial update about the broader conspiracy. Intelligence Control reports evidence of coordination between compromised royal household staff and foreign operatives at multiple royal residences. The scope of the infiltration appears to exceed initial estimates. Recommend complete security review and restructuring of all royal protection protocols. Morrison had anticipated this recommendation but was still sobered by the confirmation that the security failures were even more extensive than originally feared. Rebuilding the royal family's protection would require starting from scratch with entirely new personnel and protocols, a process that could take months to complete. Inspector Morrison, William said, what happens now? How long will we need to stay in hiding, and what will our lives look like when this is over? Morrison accessed classified protocols on one of the safe house's secure computer terminals to review the procedures for rebuilding royal security after a comprehensive breach. Your Royal Highness, the immediate priority is ensuring that all hostile operatives have been neutralized and all compromised individuals have been identified. That process could take several weeks. After that, we'll begin the process of establishing entirely new security arrangements with personnel who have been thoroughly vetted. Princess Charlotte had been listening to their conversation with the intense concentration that children often displayed when trying to understand adult problems that affected them. Inspector Morrison, does this mean that all the people who used to take care of us were bad people? Morrison realized that Charlotte's question touched on one of the most difficult aspects of their situation. While some royal household staff had been compromised, many others had remained loyal and had even risked their lives to protect the royal family during the crisis. No, sweetheart, Morrison replied gently. Most of the people who took care of you were good people who really did want to keep you safe. But some bad people tricked their way into jobs where they could pretend to be taking care of you while actually trying to hurt you. Our job now is to make sure that only the good people get to be around you in the future. The radio provided a final update that would mark the beginning of the end of the immediate crisis. Intelligence Control reports successful completion of operations at all royal residences. All hostile operatives have been neutralized or captured. Secondary sweep operations are beginning to identify and remove all compromised security equipment and communication systems. Morrison felt a profound sense of relief as he realized that Princess Charlotte was finally, truly safe from the immediate threat that had endangered her life. However, he also understood that the psychological recovery process would be long and difficult for all members of the royal family, particularly for a 9-year-old child who had been betrayed by people she trusted. Over the following days in the secure facility, Princess Charlotte demonstrated the remarkable resilience that had allowed her to survive the crisis. She adapted to their temporary living situation with grace beyond her years, finding joy in simple activities and maintaining her natural curiosity about the world around her. Morrison watched her play games with her parents and ask endless questions about their underground home, and he found hope in her ability to find normalcy even in extraordinary circumstances. When they finally received clearance to return to the surface world, Princess Charlotte emerged from the underground tunnels into bright sunlight with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The world above ground looked the same as it had before, but Morrison knew that everything had fundamentally changed for this brave little girl and her family. The investigation into the conspiracy would continue for months, revealing a web of international intrigue that had threatened not just the British monarchy, but democratic institutions across the Western world. Princess Charlotte would grow up with security measures that previous generations of royals could never have imagined. But she would also grow up with the knowledge that there were people willing to risk everything to protect her. Years later, when Princess Charlotte had grown into a confident young woman who understood the full scope of what had happened to her as a child, she would often seek out Morrison to thank him for the courage he had shown in that critical moment when he chose to step between her and danger. Morrison would always tell her that he had simply done his job, but they both knew that his decision to trust his instincts and act on his protective impulses had saved not just her life, but the future of the monarchy itself. The young princess who had once asked innocent questions about why adults sometimes hurt children would grow up to become a powerful advocate for child protection and international security cooperation. Her experience had taught her that evil could hide behind familiar faces, and that courage was often found in the simple act of choosing to do what was right, even when the cost was unknown. Detective Inspector James Morrison continued his career in royal protection, but he never forgot the small girl who had trusted him to keep her safe in the darkest moment of her young life. The bond forged in those underground tunnels would endure for decades, a reminder that sometimes the most important battles are fought not between armies, but between individuals who choose to stand for what is right against forces that would destroy innocence itself.